It's been a week since version 4.2 was released. With the patch comes the Hydro Archon herself, Focalors, or should I say Furina. Just to see how good she is, I tested over 30 different teams with the characters that I have in the Spiral Abyss. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and this time we are going to go over whether you should pull for Furina or Baizhu, or possibly even both. So let us start off with Furina. Furina is a 5-star Hydro Sword character originating from Fontaine. Her auto attack causes a special attack dealing either Uxia or Numa depending on which mode she is at certain intervals. Her charge attack allows her to swap her Arca mode at the cost of stamina. If she has short hair with dark appearance, a dark pants, or aka I call it dark mode, that is Uxia, and if she has long hair in light mode, she is in Numa. So her elemental skill summons 2 different types of summon depending on her Arca alignment. Default is the Uxia mode, aka the 3 pets, which drains your team's HP every time they hit an enemy. Light mode on the other hand summons an Oceanid which heals the active character at certain intervals. The HP drain and damage done by the Uxia mode has different multipliers respective to the summons themselves. Her elemental burst does a single instance of AoE hydro damage and grants Furina fanfare stacks. Based on how many stacks she has, she grants all damage % bonus to the entire team alongside with some healing bonus. So she gains stacks based on every 1% of HP that your team loses or gain. From my understanding, the stacks for each character is counted individually, so that means units with different HP values will give a varying number of stacks. Her Ascension 1 lets Furina heal the nearby party member based on her max HP if the healing overflows and Furina is not the one providing said healing. This healing lasts for 4 seconds. So healing overflow refers to the healing received after the character is at full health and there is some extra healing past that. Her Ascension 4 buffs her elemental skill for every 1000 points of Furina's max HP, and it buffs in 2 ways. In dark mode, it will increase the damage done by her skill, while in light mode, it will decrease the healing interval of the Oceanid summon. This Ascension caps at 40,000 HP. So, her Exploration passive decreases the cooldown of the Aberrant ability that you use in the underwater exploration. Now then, what do I think about her? She's a very good unit given how her kit makes a lot of healers way more viable than before. Units such as Barbara, Jean, and Sayu now has a very solid place in the meta thanks to Furina alone. Even someone like Mika is actually pretty decent if you want to run a physical team or like a Eula hypercarry team with Mika as the healer, since his healing is team-wide on the cast of the burst. Now let us list her pros and cons, starting with the pros. First of all, her element is Hydro, aka the best element in the game right now due to how many reactions Hydro has access to. As I have mentioned, her kit alone makes a lot of healers more relevant, so if you have units such as Barbara, Jean, Mika, or Dory, or any other healers, she single-handedly increases their value by a lot to a point where it makes them usable in a lot of meta teams right now. Her damage % buff from her burst is team-wide when compared to other buffers such as Kazuha, whose buff is only tied to 4 elements and requires Swirl to trigger, or something like Yolan's Ascension 4, which takes time to ramp up and can only buff the active character. While her Hydro application may not be the strongest, you can pair her up with another Hydro unit to strengthen the Hydro application of the team, such as a Constellation 0 Yolan or a C6 Candice for melee range, or maybe even a Kokomi. Plus, she does scale off HP, which means when you run double Hydro, you can take advantage of the Hydro resonance buff, which gives a HP increase. Now, for her cons. So it's quite hard to really point out her flaws since there isn't really anything tied to the character directly. If I were to say, the first one would be that you would absolutely need her if you want to make your healers more usable or more relevant than before. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some healers out there that are very good, that are very much usable, such as, good old Pyro Archon Bennett, Jean in certain teams, or maybe you run Jean in a Bennett Sunfire for the melt reaction or whatnot, or characters like Barbara and Kokomi in certain teams like the Nilo Bloom team, etc. And that's still fine. But her kit is just so good that it forged its own path in the current meta, with the only real downside is that you need to pull for a 5-star character in order to make that happen. And why I personally think this is a con is because Hoyo is essentially stating that they would rather release a new character to fix an older character's problem with their kit rather than addressing the issue of said character and going back and maybe fixing it directly. While you could argue that Genshin is a gacha game and there might be some legal reasons why they can't really balance or rework all the characters, I truly wish that we do not get another character like Deya in the future just for them to release another 4-star or 5-star unit which makes that bad character usable or better. So the second con is not really a con, is that you will need to build a healer and reserve a slot in the team if you want to maximize her buffs from her burst. This is more of a resource drain thing, and if you somehow don't have any healers built, you should probably dedicate some amount of time and decide which healer you want to use based on the teams you want to run. But overall, I find that most of the healers are pretty good and they work very well with Furina. Speaking of healers, let us go through all the options that we have as of version 4.2. Starting off with the 5 stars. One of the best healers right now would be Jean, because her animations are basically instant. You just EQ and you're just done. And the healing from her burst is instant and team wipe with some extra healing over time if you are standing within her field. And the fact that she's an Anemo unit means she has access to the Viridescent Venerer set, which allows you to shred some elemental resistance. And given the fact that she is a 5-star character from the standard banner, anyone who lost their 50/50s may be able to find some use if you were to get Furina. Another great 5-star healer would be Kokomi. So Kokomi has had her use in certain Bloom and Freeze teams, but now she's become even better with Furina. You can run her together with Furina to apply even more Hydro for the Hydro application, and her healing is actually quite potent for building fanfare stacks. And in certain teams, you could run Kokomi as a driver, because if you use her burst with a jellyfish, you should be able to max Furina's stacks quite easily. Another 5-star option would be the one also running right now, which is Baizhu. So Baizhu is quite good because the healing that he gets from his elemental skill is team-wide, and the shield and healing from his burst plus the Dendro application will make him a good partner if you intend to run Furina in certain Dendro teams such as Quick Bloom. Moving on to the 4-star units, we have our latest cryo healer, aka Charlotte. So Charlotte's healing is team-wide from her burst, and her healing does become even stronger if you at least possess Constellation 1, and it becomes even better if you have Constellation 6. The only downside is that she does need a good amount of energy recharge or ER to consistently burst of cooldown, and C4 will help a bit with the energy issues, but it requires you to hold E to maximize the bonus rather than tapping it. Another healer that you can use is Mika. So Mika is quite usable in Eula teams compared to before, where he doesn't really buff much unless you have C6. And he just works. I wouldn't recommend using Mika outside of running certain hyper carry physical teams. And that's all I can really say about him. And a forgotten meme unit, a standard 5-star healer, Chi-Chi, is finally usable as long as you have enough ER to burst of cooldown and you play her in some sort of quick swap team. Because the way Chi-Chi's healing works is that her burst applies this talisman mark on enemies hit by it, and you have to hit the enemies with the mark in order to trigger the healing skills of Chi-Chi's attack. And her healing is actually quite potent, so if you run a quick swap team, you should be able to do a 1 or 2 hits on maybe 2 to 3 different characters, and you'll be able to build fanfare stacks very fast, considering Furina at Constellation 0. Of course, all of this is considering Furina at C0 because that is what I have at the moment. I personally recommend running the Sacrificial Sword at high refinements to increase her skill uptime for more healing, or you could even run the likes of Favonius in order to help with her ER requirements. Another good healer would be Barbara. So Barbara, her healing doesn't fall that far behind from her sister since her burst is an instant team-wide heal, and the numbers of healing that you get is pretty good if you're running a healer build. The only real downside is that, like a lot of other healers, you do need quite a lot of ER because she is one of the few characters that their elemental skill does not generate energy. Also, she does apply the wet status on your active character if you have your skill active, and some people may not really like the experience of using her, especially when you're going against enemies that can apply cryo, thus just perma-freezing you every now and again. Another unit that actually became usable is Dori. So Dori's healing from her burst is pretty good, though the only downside is that it only heals the active character. I do find that she is much more suited for quicken teams where you run like a quick swap Kaching in order to maximize this stack building. So like you use Furina EQ, you use Dori's burst, and then you just swap to a few characters to gain a little bit of healing, then you can max her stacks pretty easily. Sayu is a very good alternative for Jean since her healing also scales off attack, and she can also use the Viridescent Venerer set. You can even run her in certain meme teams where you want to use her on field while like just rolling around with triggering the Viridescent Venerer set and just doing some good damage with swords. And I tried like a perma-freeze Sayu with KR Rosaria Furina, and it was pretty fun. It's actually pretty good. So Noelle is another unit that finally sees some light of day in terms of usability, though there are a few caveats. First of all, her healing requires you to be on field, because the way her healing works is that she gains the healing from her shield, which you trigger, and as long as her shield is up, every hit that Noelle does has a chance to trigger the healing. This problem would be fixed if you have a constellation one, because it makes that healing chance to be guaranteed if you have both her skill and burst at the same time. And then of course her skill doesn't generate energy, so you do need a good amount of ER to burst every rotation, but I've been using my Noelle with no ER rolls from the artifacts, and I've been using her with Favonia's Greatsword. She's very much able to battery herself and the entire team, and that's pretty good. And if you want to run her as a driver, you could even run her with Archaic Petra on mono elemental teams like the mono Hydro Furina team, so that she can trigger the crystallized shields. You can pick up the Hydro crystallized shield and give Hydro damage bonus to your entire team. Now, I just tested this, but Yao Yao is quite a decent unit with also a few caveats once again, since Yao Yao's burst is the one that provides the team-wide healing to help build stacks for Furina. However, you might want to run an ER weapon or ER sands too in order to burst off cooldown, and she does need to stay on field for a few seconds until you can max Furina stacks. It is possible that you can end the burst early by throwing a skill before swapping off, but the skill healing only heals the active character. Cookie is okay for healing, although very likely you're going to be running her on a triple elemental mastery build for the likes of Hyper Bloom or maybe Quicken, so her healing isn't going to be as strong as some other options. The only workaround that I've considered is running a healing bonus circlet. If you have like an onset healing bonus circuit for like Gilded to compensate for the low amount of ER, maybe you have a healing bonus circlet that has very high elemental mastery rolls. Plus, she does heal the active character at certain intervals, so it's quite hard to keep your team topped up on HP. Thus, very likely you're going to be running a team on life support constantly. And her elemental skill does drain her HP every time she wants to trigger it, so that's also a big problem. Diona is a more defensive option, although I do find her healing takes a while to trigger. Plus, you do want to run her on a healing build rather than a full-on shield, triple HP for Noblesse build if you want to maximize her healing. Her healing, once again, only applies to the active character if you are standing in her field, so do keep that in mind that you'll probably be playing a lot of circle impact. From my testing session, I didn't really like running Diona too much because it feels like quite a hassle to just swap in every now and again and wait for the healing to trigger, so I didn't really enjoy it all too much. People say Bennett don't really work, but Bennett is pretty good, though you might want to have to change his build a little bit. So I watched a video by a YouTuber that I follow by the name of Jamie, who suggested the idea of running a 4-piece Maiden's Beloved Bennett, so I decided to try it out myself. I was actually quite surprised by how good the healing was, because usually a 4 Noblesse like double HP healing bonus Bennett, or I was running like an ER HP healing bonus, I was able to heal like 5.5k to like 5 to 6k with that build. I swapped to Maidens with the Furina burst up. He was able to reach up to 9 to 10k healing, and I'm not sure if this was with max stacks or maybe almost max stacks, and that is actually pretty good. Although the downside is that there is a few downsides to this. So you would have to swap to a few characters if you want to build stacks fast, and plus you need to run a healer's build for him with mostly Maiden's Beloved, and you're not going to get much healing from the first rotation because you do need some time for Furina to let her summons drain your entire team's HP. But the second rotation onwards, it should be quite easy to max the stacks with Bennett, because if you do the right rotation, like Furina into Bennett into maybe like another unit and then unit number 4, you should be able to max out her stacks quite easily by the time you reach the 4th unit. Overall, Furina is a very good universal support unit with some pretty good damage to back her up. If you do have the right pieces for your account, she will increase the account value by a lot. Now then, enough praises about the Hydro Archon, let us move on to Baizhu. So Baizhu is a 5-star Dendro Catalyst user from Sumeru. His auto attack will always do Dendro damage, thus cannot be overridden. His skill fires a homing projectile which does 3 attacks on nearby enemies and returns to provide a team-wide healing. His burst generates a weak Dendro shield that refreshes every 2.5 seconds. Every time the shield refreshes, it heals the active character and also attacks nearby enemies, thus applying Dendro. His Ascension 1 gives him buffs based on the current HP of the active character. If it's below 50%, Baizhu gains healing bonus. If it's above 50%, he gains Dendro damage bonus. Baiju's Ascension 4 buffs Dendro reactions for every 1000 points of max HP that Baizhu has. Now then, let's go over my thought on him. Unfortunately, I do not have Baizhu on my account, so I can't really do any further testing. And since I'm waiting for Ayato, I don't want to risk losing my polls for a character that I'm not guaranteed to get, so that is the situation for me. However, I did get the chance to play him on certain teams for my viewers account in the Spiral Abyss. So a lot of people tend to compare Baizhu with his 4-star variant, which is Yao Yao. So both of them are healers, they belong to the Dendro element. So let's go over what Yao Yao does. Yao Yao applies Dendro from her skill, which summons like a bunny that throws radishes, and that bunny lasts for 10 seconds. And then her elemental burst summons even more bunnies if she is on field and she dashes and jumps within the short 5-second duration. So her skill only heals the active character if they are near a radish when they explode, while her burst does function in the same way, except it heals the entire team instead. The only downside is that Yao Yao needs to stay on field when her burst is up in order to maximize the healing, so she does need quite a lot of VR to burst off cooldown. Baizhu, on the other hand, heals the entire team and it relies on his elemental skill rather than his elemental burst. His Dendro application also lasts longer than Yao Yao's skill, which is 10 seconds compared to Baizu's 14 seconds. If I were to have a say in this matter, I think Baizhu is the better option between the two if you want to go for overall comfort, since Baizu's weak shield does provide interrupt resist on the next hit that breaks it, and his Ascension 4 does buff Dendro reactions, so that is one thing that Baizhu has that Yao Yao does not. And to be honest, there's really nothing much for me to say about Baizhu aside from how he's just really the more comfy, better version of Yao Yao, and just like Yao Yao, he's also a very good unit. I've tried certain teams like Sino Quick Bloom and certain Alhaitham teams with Baizhu, and I can say it just works. Like, it's good. I really have nothing to say about it. I would say the only reason you wouldn't want to pull for him is if you already have Yao Yao built and you don't really feel the need to get Baizhu for your account, because maybe you don't want to run like 2 Dendro teams in like 1 Dendro team in both halves of the Spiral Abyss, or you personally are not interested in running Dendro teams for whatever reason that you may have. And I've already mentioned this, but Baizhu works pretty well with Furina if you do intend to run any Quick Bloom teams or just any Dendro teams in general. So to close things off, I think both units are good in their own way, and given that Furina is an Archon, it is very likely that she will get a rerun in the near future. So at the end of the day, it really depends on what you want for your account, or maybe like we want to see what you really need for your account. I've been having a blast running different teams, testing out all those different teams with Furina, and I can vouch for her in every way possible. Anyways, give it a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more, and I wish you guys the best of luck when it comes to your summons. This is Ethereal, signing off.